something you might not know. Hey, O'Reilly here. You know what drives me crazy? How our healthcare system makes it hard and expensive to get medicine we need. Insurance companies tell your doctor what to do. Pharmacies refuse to fill valid prescriptions. And good luck getting the treatments you actually want. But finally, someone's stepping up. All Family Pharmacy is a family-owned business that puts people first and believes in medical freedom. They are changing how Americans can get fast, affordable access to trusted medications. Just go online, choose from more than 200 options. Antibiotics, ivermectin, NAD, plus even your daily meds. A doctor reviews your order, writes the prescription, and your meds ship straight to your door. It's simple, it's smart, and it's about time. So please go to allfamilypharmacy.com/bill. Use code BILL10 to save 10%.
Someone had a birthday.
Yep, 50. Can't believe it.
50 years of wisdom.
Great segue. We have health news, a CDC update.
Pneumococcal vaccination is now recommended for adults 50 or older. Says here, we're over 6 times more likely to be hospitalized with pneumococcal pneumonia than adults under 50.
I don't love those odds.
Same. Look what I found. Pfizer's Prevnar 20 is proven to help protect adults against pneumococcal pneumonia and invasive pneumococcal disease in just 1 dose, and millions have already gotten it.
Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you have a severe allergy to its ingredients. A weakened immune system may lower your response. Common side effects include injection site pain and swelling, fatigue, headache, muscle, and joint pain. For full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138. Visit Prevnar20.com or talk to your doctor or pharmacist.
I'm on Prevnar20.com now, scheduling my appointment.
Good idea. And happy 50th.
Now the O'Reilly update brings you something you might not know. The summer season is mainly associated with outside, sun, fun, surf, all that. But it's also the time when Hollywood releases its biggest films of the year. From outer space to giant sharks, here are the greatest summer blockbusters of all time. Number 10, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The 1981 debut of Indiana Jones earned $350 million worldwide. Next, Disney's The Lion King. The animated tale is actually a retelling of William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Total box office haul, $400 million. Wow. Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. Though the movie is officially titled Episode 1, it's actually the 4th film of the franchise. Despite terrible reviews, the movie made $600 million worldwide. Jurassic Park. The dinosaur flick cost $68 million to produce, earned $750 million worldwide. Number 6, Return of the Jedi. Global ticket sales, $1 billion. The top 5 starts with Avengers Endgame. Superhero movie was the first to break the $1 billion mark during its opening weekend. Number 4, Alien. The 1979 horror classic features Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, and a 9-foot-tall space creature who is not friendly. Since its release, Alien has spawned 9 sequels and 4 TV shows, also 50 video games. Third place on the movie list, Jaws. I saw it the other night on TV. The movie sparked a global hysteria surrounding sharks. Second spot goes to E.T., the extraterrestrial. Total sales, $2.3 billion. The biggest summer blockbuster of all time, the original Star Wars. Film cost $10 million to make, very inexpensive. Total ticket sales to this moment, $3 billion. And here's something else you might not know. Most of these movies came from the minds of 2 men, Steven Spielberg and his close friend, George Lucas. Back after this. If you are stressed about back taxes and maybe missed the April deadline or your books are a mess, act now. Because the IRS is cracking down and penalties are up to 25% just for not filing. Tax Network USA has helped thousands of Americans lift that burden And they can help you, whether you are an employee, small business owner, or haven't filed in years. They have seen it all and know exactly how to clean it up. Tax Network USA's expert negotiators have direct access to powerful IRS programs, and they know how to win. You'll get a free consultation. And if you qualify, they will help you reduce or eliminate what you owe. Plus, they'll protect you from wage garnishments and bank levies. So please don't wait. 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/bill. That's tnusa.com/bill. Thank you for listening to the O'Reilly Update. I am Bill O'Reilly. No spin, just facts, and always looking out for you.
News, analysis, opinion. News Talk STL. KLGY HD3 Clayton, K270BW Bellefonte, KNBS Bowling Green. This is News Talk STL at 1019, 94.1, and always streaming at newstalkstl.com.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Trump is placing the Washington, D.C. Police Department under federal control and deploying the National Guard to make the nation's capital safer.
We're taking it back under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States. I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control.
Trump posted online Monday the nation's capital would be liberated and he'd end the days of ruthlessly killing or hurting innocent people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defended a new military offensive in Gaza that's more sweeping than previously announced. Correspondent Bernie Bennett has more.
The Prime Minister declared Sunday in the face of growing condemnation that Israel has, quote, no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. Netanyahu said the Security Cabinet last week instructed the dismantling of Hamas's strongholds not only in Gaza City, but also in the central camps and Muwasi. Netanyahu spoke to foreign media just before an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, saying, quote, our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza. The sprawling camps were not part of Israel's announcement Friday. Netanyahu's office said he has spoken with U.S. President Donald Trump about the plan and thanked him for his support. Bernie Bennett reporting.
Explosions at a U.S. steel plant near Pittsburgh have left one dead and dozens injured or trapped under the rubble, with emergency workers on site trying to rescue them. An Allegheny County spokesperson says the explosions happened Monday morning at the Clairton Coke Works. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 200 points, the Nasdaq dropping 64, with the S&P 500 lower by 16, oil at $64.06 a barrel. More at townhall.com.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and then call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor was kind, and best of all, she didn't judge me. In just a few minutes, she helped me figure out a plan that consolidated all my bills into one lower monthly payment. This substantially reduced my high interest rates and put me on the road to success. In the end, I saved thousands in interest, and today my credit card debt is a thing of the past.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-990-6976.
My name is Neil. Take it from someone who's been there. Call Trinity and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-990-6976.
From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty, so most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees, and then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two, not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest from the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
This hour of News Talk STL brought to you by Chris Cooper and Serenity Wealth Management. Discover little-known strategies that could be the difference between choosing the care you deserve or having someone else decide it for you. Get a free copy of Chris's book at serenityltc.com.
Hey, folks, it's Jamie Allman here for the Walner home selling team of Berkshire Hathaway. I love this team so much, and Rodney and Jen love the team so much, I became a member. So now I'm an agent with the Walner home selling team of Berkshire Hathaway, and I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that we're going to get you into a home really super easily and with the lowest cost you're ever going to find, and make sure we find you that dream home. We're also going to list your home and get the top dollar for your home. I'm telling you, Rodney and Jen love this business. You can tell it is infectious, and I'm so happy to be a real estate agent there with them. 314-810-SOLD, 314-810-SOLD. Whether you are buying your home or selling your home, I'm telling you what, the costs are going to be absolutely totally minimal, but the professionalism and getting the job done for you is going to be 100%. The Walner home selling team of Berkshire Hathaway, 314-810-SOLD, 314-810-SOLD.
All the information I need on the drive to work.
Mike Ferguson in the morning. I keep it on throughout the day, whether it's local, national, or something big that's happening overseas.
News, analysis, and opinion.
St. Louis is #1 for conservative talk.
News Talk STL.
Tim Jones and Chris Arps in the afternoon.
The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
The more you remove voting from Election Day, the more opportunity you're offering for people to commit fraud.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
I think the Democrats are so short-sighted in this tactic they have now to just cheat at any cost to win elections.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you.
What are we doing wrong here?
As a former leader in the House, I think you can put your finger on it. It's called leadership. We don't have it.
Tim Jones and Chris Arps.
Good afternoon, St. Louis. Welcome to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show on 1019 94.1 News Talk STL. This is Patrick Tuohey, senior fellow with the Show Me Institute, and Kansas City's second favorite Patrick, guest hosting today. Tim and Chris are in the Holy Land for the week, and I know what you're thinking. Haven't those poor people suffered enough? We'll hear dispatches from both Chris and Tim later on today, and then tomorrow and Wednesday, they'll be broadcasting live from Israel. So I think that's as close to must-listen radio as we have in St. Louis, so tune in. We've got a full show for you today. Joey V is here to make sure I don't screw up too badly, and God willing, keeping his finger on the dump button.
Hey, Patrick.
In a few minutes, we'll talk to Senator Jim Talent, chairman of the Reagan Institute's Leadership Council, a little bit about events in Israel and then some domestic issues closer to home. But right now, I am very pleased to introduce our first guest, the Missouri Mike Royko, the Jack Germond of Gateway City, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, author, committed social justice warrior, and president of his homeowners association, the great and powerful Tony Messenger. Tony, I believe this is your first appearance on News Talk STL. Is that true?
That might be the finest introduction I've ever had, Patrick. President of my homeowners association. I am sure all of the presidents of homeowners associations across the St. Louis region are tuned in right now to hear what we have to say about HMOs.
Well, look, I want to, I want to end on the biggest issue, the most important issue, of course. You've been covering St. Louis for almost 20 years, more really, but for the Post-Dispatch for 20 years. You won a Pulitzer Prize for, I think, a 2019 column on debtors' prisons in Missouri. You've written a book entitled Profit and Punishment, How America Criminalizes the Poor. And then before writing at the Post-Dispatch, you wrote for the Columbia Daily Tribune, where I think it's fair to say you were one of the most prominent State House reporters. And then you moved to the Springfield News Leader for a little bit before coming to the Post-Dispatch in 2008. Do I have everything right there? Have I left anything out?
You do. And remind me, Patrick, because we've known each other a while. I can't remember if we met when I was in Columbia or Springfield, or if it wasn't until St. Louis. It's been a while. It
has been a while.
Years.
We visited for coffee a few years ago, but it has been a long time. And to be honest with you, I don't know. It's all a blur because in 2006, I was involved in a constitutional amendment issue. I didn't join Show Me until I think 2013. So I know our paths have crossed. I've certainly been reading your work, but yeah, I imagine writing columns for so many years, it is tough to remember who you've met and when you've met them.
That is true. Things do tend to run together.
I don't want to talk too much about individual politics per se. What I'm really interested to know, and I'll be talking about this with my guests throughout this show, is because you've been covering St. Louis for so long and so closely, you may be in the best position to tell me, how do you interpret what's been going on in St. Louis over maybe the past 30 or longer? How do you, if you were talking to somebody who wasn't from St. Louis, and of course I'm in Kansas City right now, how do you tell the story of where the city is now and how it's gotten there? And of course, St. Louis has been known for decades as having a crime problem. It has been losing population, the city proper, for years. How do you interpret that, and how do you explain it?
Well, so much of the demise of St. Louis, and let me be clear, I love St. Louis, and I think St. Louis is constantly sort of on the verge of the second coming, if you will, if we can ever get out of our own way. But there's a couple of different things. First of all, a lot of Midwestern manufacturing cities have suffered through the same sorts of hollowing out that's happened in some St. Louis neighborhoods. But one of the things that I constantly turn back to, and this is something that has been part of the regional discussion for long before I got here, but it's consistently been part of the discussion since I got here, and that is our government division, the fact that the city is separated from the county, the fact that within that county there are, I think it's actually 88 now, but historically been 90 plus, separate municipalities. Right. And how do you get all the ships aligned and moving in one direction so that the region can be, successful? And that is a really difficult thing. And, highlighted most recently in the past few years with the rise and quick fall of the Better Together movement. But that concept didn't end with just one attempt to get St. Louis put back together. And that was not the first one or the second or even the third. And it definitely won't be the last. So that's one of the biggest things that I think people from the outside don't necessarily see, and particularly visitors. I run into visitors who absolutely love St. Louis because they come here for our zoo, our arts, our sports, the arch, the Missouri and Mississippi River, opportunities, and they see the things that they want to see, and they're like, wow, that's really a great city. And I'd love for people to view St. Louis that way. But, the reality on the ground is I live out in Wildwood, and people give me a hard time for living in Wildwood when I write about the city. And yet I know people in the city who never make their way out to Wildwood because they think anything west of 270 is Kansas. And so, that division is very real in our community. And much like your community in Kansas City, being both of Missouri's major metro areas, Kansas City, where you live, and St. Louis, are border cities in which half of our population is in another state, or at least a large percentage of our population is in another state. And what's happening right now in Kansas City as Missouri and Kansas fight over the opportunity to build a new stadium and spend taxpayer dollars on that effort in one jurisdiction or the other, that's a great highlight of what often happens in St. Louis, as we are constantly fighting amongst ourselves for the next economic development opportunity. And we're bidding against ourselves all the time as compared to saying, how do we as Missouri or how do we as St. Louis or Kansas City, bring somebody here instead of to Indianapolis or Louisville or Nashville or, whatever hot city is being talked about at the time.
I was thinking of the parallels while you were talking about St. Louis with what I am more familiar with in Kansas City. And part of it, and maybe it's more so in St. Louis, but part of it is those bedroom communities, the municipalities around the urban core really aren't interested in working with the urban core. A lot of people have left the city. They've moved out to the suburbs. They don't have any confidence in urban political leadership. And so, although you and I might say it is good if these regions see themselves as true regions rather than municipalities, it really is difficult. And I'm sure this is what Better Together campaign ran into. It really is difficult to explain to the suburban communities the value of working with the urban core.
It is, and it's not entirely true that those suburban communities don't want to work with the urban core. There actually are some pretty good examples of when that has happened. I mean, in the last year, for instance, I've written on 2 efforts that have been run through the East-West Gateway Council of Governments. That's
right.
This conglomeration that includes all the big governments in the St. Louis metro region on both sides of the river. And there have been 2 major efforts in the last year, one of them pretty far down the road and one of them just still getting going. Both of which got started when the former mayor in the city, Tasharo Jones, asked East-West Gateway to get involved. And so over the last couple of years, that organization, with leaders from all the major cities and counties in the St. Louis metro area, have studied how to reduce homicides,
right,
and how to better provide services to the unhoused population. And there's been pretty significant regional buy-in from government leaders in the St. Louis region on both of those efforts. And so, it's not a simple issue of saying, well, people in suburban St. Louis don't want to go to the city, or the city, the county executive and the mayor and the people in Chesterfield and Lincoln County and Jefferson County don't have the same efforts. Their leaders are actually doing some things where they're working together on the problems because they realize that the region doesn't succeed if St. Louis doesn't succeed. So there are efforts toward a better, more unified region, but they're few and far between, and they're always really complicated and politically fraught for those leaders that are involved in them.
If you're just tuning into News Talk STL, do not adjust your dial. This is Patrick Tuohey, guest hosting for Tim Jones and Chris Arps. And yes, that is the voice of Tony Messenger you are hearing on News Talk STL. I want to hear a little bit about your book, Profit and Punishment, How America Criminalizes the Poor. Do you have kind of a 30-second explanation of the book or the issues you tackle in it?
Sure. So the book started with my series of columns in 2018 and 19 that looked at a problem that is really a rural jail problem in St. Louis or in Missouri. Almost every county jail in this state charges a fee for basically rent, like a hotel fee when you're in jail. And then after you spend your time in jail, you get this bill. And it can be several $100,000, several $100, or several $1,000. And what was happening in Missouri is that the people who couldn't afford to pay those bills were then being put back in jail, and it literally debtor's prison. Well, Profit and Punishment is about how our criminal justice system punishes poor people in all sorts of ways. These bills for jail. The fines,
court fines. I mean, the reports that came out of Ferguson were remarkable. And I would talk to my daughters about how expensive it can be to be poor, because
and one
you
of the
get
things
nickel and
that the
dimed
book
by
does-
programs like this.
Exactly. And one of the things that the book does is it ties Ferguson to rural Missouri. This is not a black problem. This is not a white problem. This is a criminal justice problem. And one of the reasons that I write about criminal justice issues so often, you make light of the fact that Tony Messenger is on this conservative talk radio show. Well, criminal justice issues, I am finding, have a resonance on both the right and the left. And people from different political backgrounds might come to the issue for different reasons. But there is massive bipartisan belief that our criminal justice system should stop damaging people's poverty and focus instead on just reducing crime.
When Governor Greitens was in office, there was an effort at criminal justice reform, and I had the opportunity with the Show Me Institute to work with a lot of left of center groups. And the issues, we agreed on the issues. It was often just how we talked about them. It could be from the left, kind of a social justice issue where you focus on, again, the victims who are being harmed, as you described. But for the right, it can be seen, the exact same issue can just be seen as an expansive government that is treading on individual rights and kind of feeding on them through fees, through fines, through all sorts of, even the Declaration of Independence talks about swarms of officers to eat out our sustenance. So I think you're exactly right. Oftentimes, if you're willing to consider a different approach to the same issue, you can bring the right and left together.
Well, here's another great example, and it's more recent. In the last year, I've been writing about the Missouri Incarceration Reimbursement Act, which is a law that allows the Attorney General of the state to sue inmates and take their assets to allegedly help pay for their time in prison. And what's happening is really poor people in prison are losing what little money they have that they were expected to be able to use to reintegrate themselves in society because the state was taking it. And it was such a tiny little bit of money, it made no dent in the state budget. Well, what happened this last year is the very red Republican supermajority Missouri legislature repealed that law after my reporting on it. And one of the reasons that happened is because an attorney on the right side of the spectrum, a gentleman named Biba Shock, who I'm sure you've talked to, he's done some things with Show Me previously.
He's on our board.
Attorney on the left, Irene Carnes, who's a retired public defender from Columbia. They both ended up representing some of the inmates that I was writing about and filing motions in Cole County Court seeking to get this law declared unconstitutional. And as that was happening, some Republican lawmakers were told about it, and they ended up filing a bill to repeal the law, and it got repealed. And, so there's a fascinating example of the bipartisan nature of criminal justice reform. And it wasn't controversial at all. And it was a great thing that happened in Missouri this year.
Tony, I am so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you. I have so many more questions I want to talk to you, but there just isn't time. Next time I'm in St. Louis or passing through Wildwood, we'll get coffee. But thank you again for participating. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with Senator Jim Talent. You're listening to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show on News Talk STL.
Dropping truth bombs and making you think. It's the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show. From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty. So most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees. And then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two. Not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest on the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
News, analysis, opinion.
This is good for America. This is good for the American people. It's good for working families.
You will start seeing historic growth like we've never seen before.
This is a 100-year catastrophe.
There have been some 850 rescues.
Their base are increasingly illegals, criminals, and people who love criminals.
You plead the fifth usually when you have criminal liability.
There are always going to be issues that we disagree on.
101.9 and 94.1.
St. Louis is number one
for conservative talk. News Talk STL.
You know, isn't it time to buy, to look for, to find some nice, really fine things for the wonderful, fine people in your life? Well, I've got the one-stop shop for you. Newsteaders Fine Jewelers. You can find them online at wowdiamonds.com. They named their website after their fantastic diamonds because that's what you say when you see them. You go, wow. Wowdiamonds.com is where you find Newsteaders Fine Jewelers. You also find them at 2961 Daughtery Ferry Road. They're just 2 miles west of Interstate 270, right in the heart of the county of St. Louis. An incredibly successful jewelry store, thanks to all of you, since 1961. How have they beat, I would argue, not just meet, but beat the big box stores? Well, because it's a family environment. They're not some big, giant, sterile big box. They have everything they have, and they're going to deliver it to you with that Newsteaders difference. It's that family, that loving family touch. Their stuff, their things are fantastic, from the diamonds and beyond. What else do they have? Hand engraved items that Richard makes himself. He's a master engraver. Pendants, earrings, gemstones. They do all sorts of jewelry pairs. They have beautiful watches. I have this awesome Frank Sinatra themed Belova watch. It's just a fantastic store with fantastic things with delivered to you by fantastic people. Newsteaders Fine Jewelers. You can find them 24/7, like I said, at wowdiamonds.com. That's Newsteaders Fine Jewelers. wowdiamonds.com.
Tony Colombo here for the Farmers Co-op Old Town Country Store in Old Town St. Peters, where they have a huge selection of products and services for your yard and home, including a full line of lawn and garden products, a full line of products for animal care, and that includes anything from livestock to the family dog or cat. They'll fill any size propane tank for about half the price of a new one, and so much more. Visit them in St. Peters on 2nd Street, right behind the QT at 70 and Mid-Rivers Mall Drive, and check out all their products and services at oldtowncountrystore.com.
Hey, Jamie Allman here for Patriot Heating and Cooling. When your home's comfort is on the line, you need a team you can trust. That's why I recommend Patriot Heating and Cooling, St. Louis's trusted team of HVAC experts. These pros make customer service their number one priority, whether it's a summer breakdown or a winter emergency. Booking your service couldn't be easier. Just visit callpatriothvacstl.com or call 314-527-2722. Patriot Heating and Cooling. Comfort every day, the Patriot way.
News Talk STL. This hour of Jones and Arps is brought to you by Stifel. Contact your Stifel financial advisor at stifel.com. That's STIFEL.com. You're listening to Tim Jones and Chris Arps.
Welcome back to the Tim Jones and Chris Arp Show on 101.9, 94.1 News Talk STL. This is Patrick Tuohey, Senior Fellow at the Show Me Institute and Kansas City's second favorite Patrick, sitting in. Tim and Chris are in the Holy Land for the week. We'll hear from them in a bit. And then tomorrow and Wednesday, the Jones and Arp Show will be broadcasting directly from Israel. And given events there, it should be a fascinating broadcast. Here to speak about those events is Senator Jim Talent, chairman of the Reagan Institute's Leadership Council and a longtime observer of international events. Jim, I think it's best for the sake of full disclosure that I tell the audience of our indirect relationship. As a fellow at the Show Me Institute, I answer to your spouse. But I think if we both agree to behave, we can get through this without getting ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, I'm glad there's somebody else who answers to her. So
listen, Jim, I went back and read your Wikipedia biography. You have had an impressive career, and I recommend anybody who hasn't looked at it in a while to peruse it. you served, of course, in the Missouri legislature. You were elected to the U.S. House. You served then in the U.S. Senate. You ran for governor somewhere in the middle. And since then, you've spent a lot of time writing about foreign affairs. And I followed a lot of what you've written. I have to say, it's not the kind of stuff I want to read before bed. And I don't think you're an alarmist, but you write about alarming things. And, not only are Tim and Chris in Israel, but it seems as if Israel is committing itself to going back into Gaza. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are of that. And more broadly, I'm interested in knowing what drew you to foreign policy and writing about Russia, China, Iran in the first place.
Well, first, the last time I looked at my wiki page, our friends on the left had gotten to it, so I'm not sure how reliable it is. But you can always look at my biography on the Reagan Institute, where I'm the chairman of the National Leadership Conference. I've been interested. I mean, even as a young man, I read a lot about World War II and foreign policy. And when I went into the United States House, I was able to get a seat on the Armed Services Committee. So defense in particular, more so than foreign policy, although the two go together, obviously, because you structure your armed forces to meet the threats to your national interest as presidents have typically defined them. But that was really one of my portfolios and continued afterwards. I mean, when I left the Senate, I originally spent about 6 years with Romney on both his campaigns. I was very interested in going to the Department of Defense if he had won. And I've co-chaired a bunch of commissions, so and advisory commissions and the rest of it on national security. Now, I usually write. America was at the apex of its power at the end of the Cold War, Patrick. I'm old enough to remember that. And we had about 20 years in which we blundered from one disaster to another. Again, people my age will remember a lot of this. Beginning with letting the North Koreans get nuclear weapons, not anticipating 9/11, much less preventing it, facilitating the rise of China, which historically will be viewed the worst. And another really big thing is allowing our national defenses, the armed forces, to atrophy. And that began to be reversed in the first Trump administration, and they're now doing it with the real will. And so I don't think one should ever be put on rose-colored glasses and looking at the future, but America has enormous reservoirs of influence and power it hasn't tapped yet. And purposeful, decisive leadership can make an enormous difference, and I think is. Now, in terms of Gaza, I mean, here's what I'll say. I think it was Abed Eban, an Israeli prime minister, who said the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So they had a chance here. If they'd agreed to something like the Witkoff deal, I'm talking about Hamas, and there aren't any worse people in the world than Hamas, but I'm going to talk about it in an antiseptic way. If they had agreed in return for a ceasefire to give back, say, half the remaining hostages, they have about 20 left. They could have got a 6-week, 2-month ceasefire. They would have negotiated. They could have negotiated after that. It would have been very difficult, I think, for Israel to resume the war if Hamas agreed to give back the rest of the hostages in return for at least being allowed de facto, if not de jure, to remain in Gaza. But they saw they were winning the propaganda war in the pages of the New York Times and at Columbia University and places like that, and so they turned it down. And now Israel, which has become the hegemon of the Middle East, that means they're capable of dominating their strategic environment. They're moving into Gaza, and they are with the mission of utterly destroying Hamas. And I would not bet against it. We can talk about how they're planning to do it. I've read some of that from people I trust. But after they do it, at that point, I think some of the Arab countries will be willing to come in and administer Gaza. Yeah. Once Hamas is gone, nobody wants to go in there and run it while Hamas is there. Unless they're prepared to suppress Hamas. But I think afterwards, and then maybe we can rebuild Gaza.
Let me ask you, you talked about rebuilding the military. My father was career foreign service. My brothers and I grew up stationed all over the world. And I had considered a career on the foreign service when I graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my father pretty much talked me out of it. He said, look, the Cold War is over. Budgets are going to be slashed. There's no, you're not going to have the romantic career I did during the Cold War. And I think he was absolutely right. But when I was in high school, I used to read, I think it was the CIA Fact Book. It was this glossy kind of bound magazine that looked at Soviet military equipment. Forgive me, it wasn't the Fact Book. It was the Soviet military armaments. And, we were told in the 80s that the Soviets were a considerable force, that we needed to be prepared. We needed to spend a lot of money. And, we've seen, again, I know it's not the Soviets, it's the Russians, but we've seen them in Ukraine. They're not impressive. We've been told for years, and again, I don't believe there's a military intelligence better than the Israelis, but we were told for years that the ring of fire surrounding Israel was, competent and could overwhelm Israel, and that has proven illusory. And so as a civilian in the United States, when I hear you or others talking about the threats abroad, how do I evaluate that? Because it feels twofold. In the past, we've overstated the threat. And then there are some who say, well, it's in the interest of a military to overstate the threat. And there's some truth to both of that. What do you say to me about that?
Sure. Well, you're asking the right question, because the size of the military you need and the shape you want to make it, in other words, the size and shape of the force structure, depends on the interests you want to protect and the threats to those interests. Now, one of the things you have to remember is the United States has global interests. When people talk about what are the vital national interests of the United States, it's defense of the homeland. It's protecting the right of Americans to move, trade, and travel in the international commons on the same terms as everybody else. And that's why, shipping, for example, when there's attacks on shipping in the Persian Gulf, we get involved.
Right.
We've gotten involved in wars because of that. I mean, you can argue we entered World War I because the Germans were attacking our shipping. And then the third is preserving an acceptable balance of power, a stability that is not dominated by an anti-American power or powers in the key areas of the world, which is basically Eurasia. Okay. And since our interests are global, we need a global expeditionary armed forces. And the object of the armed forces, generally speaking, is not to fight, but to be strong enough to deter any major, because what we don't want is escalating armed conflict with a peer competitor. That's just general principles. And I know we don't have all afternoon. The pace, you are correct in the sense that if the Chinese were as weak as they were 25 years ago, the danger would be much less than it is. But the pacing threat, as the Pentagon calls it, is the Chinese. And they are a peer competitor. I'll give you an example. I mean, they have one shipyard which has greater capacity than all of our naval shipyards. We're outnumbered in ships west of Hawaii about 6-1. They dominate the East and South China Sea, and 50% of the world's shipping goes through there. Their goals are global, but in the short term, what they want is to control. For example, they want a situation, and they claim sovereignty over the East and South China Sea, where they can tell us, oh, you want to trade with Vietnam? Here are the terms. You got to pay us. You got to do this. That stuff is intolerable to us. So the object here, the immediate object has to be to build up those aspects of the force which are necessary to strengthen deterrence in Indo-PACOM. And that's what the administration is doing. We can argue about how well they're doing it, but they have the right objective in mind.
Briefly, can I take, and again, I know this is foolish because it's better to be vigilant, but can I take any solace in knowing that the Chinese military seems to be, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, largely theoretical? They haven't fought wars. They look impressive. They can build a lot, but unlike Americans, they haven't necessarily tested themselves.
Yeah, it's another very good point. When I was in the China Commission, I was there for 8 years. We were the the main advisory committee to the Congress on issues related to China. I'm trying to remember what year it was. It may have been 2020. We did a chapter in our report. We wrote this huge report every year. And basically we're telling people, look, the Chinese aren't 10 feet tall. They have all kinds of domestic issues. And one of the big issues they have, they call it the 5 incapables. They themselves are concerned about not about the materiel. I mean, they've got the ships. They got the biggest arsenal of ballistic and cruise missiles in the world. Some of them are hypersonic. I mean, I could go on, and they're doing well in advanced weaponry. But you are correct. I mean, the PLA hasn't fought a war since, I think, 1979 against Vietnam, and they lost that one. And there's a real issue whether they can operate jointly. What we're talking about here, though, is risk. In other words, it's not a certainty that the balloon's going to go up, but what we want to do is reduce the risk, because our object is to protect our vital national interests, staying as far away from escalating armed conflict as we can. So that's why I call it strengthening deterrence. We don't want to win a war over Taiwan. We want to prevent one. And right now, there's gap in capabilities. I mean, that's my major concern now, as we've seen in the Middle East. The forces we have, if we have time to concentrate them, can operate very effectively in an environment that's not that competitive. In other words, like Iran, right? But it's a different thing when you go inside the second island chain in East Asia.
I want to take a step back a bit. And as I mentioned earlier, my father was in the Foreign Service. Early on in my life, I was very interested in international affairs. As I have focused more in state and local policy, that's kind of gone into the background. But I listen to a lot of podcasts about it. And one of the things that frustrates me is the terms are changing. So it used to be you kind of knew you had a conservative, containment or anti-communist worldview. But now I'm hearing terms like, internationalism, neoconservatism, realism, restrainers, economic nationalists. Is there any agreement on what these? It feels like everything's in flux. Somebody's kind of thrown all the definitions up in the air, and they haven't quite landed. Is there a way to think about maybe the standard conservative Reagan foreign policy, which was strength? What would we call that today? And are there world visions, legitimate world visions, that are actually growing, or is this just kind of everybody trying to, stake out some ground for when things change? I guess I don't even know how to frame the question.
That's another great question. I'm not just blowing smoke at you. The closest I'll ever come to writing a book was this really long article I wrote with John Kyle in 2013 for the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation. It was a joint project. And the point of that article was that a lot of our problems was because of a lack of strategic clarity in the post-Cold War era. We'd never defined what our national mission was after we beat the Soviets. And if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, it's pretty hard to figure out what capabilities you need to accomplish it, right? So you are correct. That's one of the reasons I try and talk about what interests constitute national security, right?
Right.
So right now, I would say it's pretty clear right now that we are pursuing a foreign policy, and I agree totally with this. I've always been what they call a realist. You've read on this stuff, which means nations pursue their interests and we should do the same. And obviously, President Trump believes that. So, and it's pretty clear if you look at what he's doing, what he thinks are the really important interests of the United States, and he's building up the tools to accomplish that. The other thing, two other things I'll say really quickly. One of them is another role of the armed forces. By deterring actual kinetic aggression, we give the civilian tools of national influence, economic tools, intelligence, diplomacy. We give those time and space and energy to work. And the second thing in support of that, your dad, George Kennan, your dad will know who he is.
Oh, sure.
He said once, it's amazing how much more pleasant diplomacy is when you have a little armed force in the background.
Yes.
In other words, the power that you have, you often don't have to use if it's sufficient, right? And you're seeing Trump doing that. Now, it's not the threat of intervention, but he's using the tools of economic power to try and get Putin to the table to agree to something reasonable in Ukraine. I couldn't support that more, by the way. I wrote 2 years ago. We should have been negotiating for a peace in Eastern Europe.
A quick question before we go. When you think about China, when you think about Iran, Gaza, Russia, are you an optimist?
I'm much more optimistic now, and I don't want to sound like I'm, here to advertise for Donald Trump, but the balance of power in the Middle East has decisively changed, and I think it's going to remain this way for the intermediate term anyway, and change in a very good direction because Iranian power has been broken. I think the Chinese are back-footed now. They're off-footed. They don't know how to deal. Trump is shifting the competition or conflict between us and China into the economic domain, where we have the advantage. And because the Chinese can't compete, I mentioned before, they're not 10 feet tall.
Right.
Look, they don't have a private banking system. They can't price risk. They don't have a legal system. They don't have an effective tax system. They got enormous environmental degradation. They're popular. They got a demographic problem that's worse than ours. They have huge problems. And if we keep the lid on, and this does not bust out into open warfare, I'm optimistic about what the results of the competition will be. But you have to remember, they know that too. Right. They know where they have an advantage. And so the danger is that they will decide to push this to a confrontation before we are able to strengthen deterrence. It's a risk gap. Sure. Is what they call it in the Pentagon. So am I optimistic? Look, I'm an eternal optimist where the United States is concerned. I have enormous respect for the American people. I think our system is a great one. So yeah, I am, but I also write these articles and I'm scared.
No, that's right. Yeah, no, I get it. Well, look, it's two sides of the same coin. You can be optimistic, assuming everybody takes the status quo seriously. I
mean, just Senator, realistically, it's just let's not live in fantasy worlds here.
Senator, I've got to run. I am grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Tim Jones and Chris Arps show on 101.9 and 94.1 News Talk STL. We will be right back after this celebration of the free market.
You're listening to Tim Jones and Chris Arps. From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty, so most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees. And then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two, not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest on the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
On the next Larry Connors USA.
With every Larry Connors USA program, you're going to get news, analysis, opinion, and education.
Larry Connors USA. Now weeknights 6 until 8 on News Talk STL.
Don't wait for some crisis or catastrophe to befall you. Get an attorney on your side right now today. Set up an appointment with Todd Sivia and the great crew that he's got at the Sivia Law Center. 7 of them all around the metro area. Sivia Law will assist you, help you through all of life's transitions and challenges. We all have them, right? You might as well get a great attorney on your side right now. And everybody needs to do a little planning, right? The little planning now takes care, an ounce of prevention, pound of cure, all that stuff. I would recommend you use Sivia Law for all that. Estate planning needs. Yes, they specialize in estate planning. Wills, trusts, powers of attorney. A 2-week turnaround of completed documents from the initial sit down. Right now, the first 10 callers this week that mention Tim Jones and News Talk STL, when you get a hold of the Sivia Law Centers, you get a free 300-hour strategy session. So when you call them at 833-995-WILL, 833-995-WILL, just mention Tim Jones, and you will get that free 300-hour strategy session. Make sure you mention us when you give them a call. 7 convenient locations around the entire St. Louis metro. All kinds of great information on their website, civialaw.com. That's civialaw.com.
Looking for an underwater adventure or a scaly new friend? Dive into Tropical World Pets on Watson Road. For 32 years, this family-owned wonderland has been St. Louis's go-to destination for all things aquatic and reptilian. With over 7,000 square feet of aquariums, we're home to the area's largest selection of freshwater fish, including rare cichlids you won't find anywhere else. But that's not all. We've got tarantulas, snakes, and lizards galore. Tropical World Pets, 314-849-4020, or visit twpstl.com.
This hour of Jones and Arps is brought to you by Stifel. Contact your Stifel financial advisor at stifel.com. That's STIFEL.com. Tim Jones and Chris Arps, driving the leftists crazy all afternoon.
Welcome back to the Tim Jones and Chris Arp Show on 1019 94.1 News Talk STL. This is Patrick Tuohey, Senior Fellow at the Show Me Institute and Kansas City's second favorite Patrick. I'm going to keep saying that till it catches on, ladies and gentlemen. As I've mentioned, Tim and Chris are in Israel this week. They'll be broadcasting their entire show from the Holy Land tomorrow and Wednesday. So I recommend you listen in, but they're also sending us clips and speeches today. So here is Chris's corner that he sent us earlier.
Chris.
And if you don't know, now you know.
And now, Chris's Corner.
Today was one of those rare days when history, faith, and the present moment collide in a way that you can feel deep in your soul. Our journey began in the old city of Jerusalem, walking narrow streets where every stone has a story to tell. We visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of the holiest sites in all of Christianity. And inside, I stood before the slab where the body of Jesus is said to have been laid after the crucifixion. I paused there, I prayed there, and I imagined those solemn hours over 2,000 years ago. From there, we made our way to the spot where Jesus was crucified. This time, I did something I didn't do on my last trip. I reached down beneath the altar and touched the stones. Cold, rough, ancient stones that may have once been stained with the blood of the Savior. It was a quiet, humbling moment. One of those rare times when you realize you're not just seeing history, you're touching it. You're touching faith. Something new for me this trip was the excavation of what they're calling the Pilgrim's Road. This is all underground, a hidden roadway from the time of the Second Temple. Archaeologists believe it's the very path Jewish pilgrims took to reach the Temple Mount. Along the way, they're uncovered remarkable artifacts, including a coin now preserved under plexiglass. It's not open to the general public yet. Only VIP tours are being allowed. But it's a powerful reminder that even after thousands of years, Jerusalem still has secrets waiting to be uncovered. Later in the day, we had the privilege of meeting Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, and the First Lady. Also, there was someone very familiar to Americans, renowned attorney Alan Dershowitz. We had a Q&A session afterward, and it was a rare chance to hear firsthand about the challenges Israel faces and the alliances it relies upon. But the most emotional part of the day came during a visit to the World Holocaust Remembrance Center, Yad Vashem. There we sat with three parents who lost their children on October 7th in the Hamas terrorist attack. I don't think anyone can prepare you for looking into the eyes of a mother or father who has endured that kind of loss. Their voices trembled, but their message was steady. They want the truth told, and they want the world to remember. We ended the evening hearing from an Israeli general who planned the historic attacks against Iran. His words were direct and without hesitation. Israel will defend itself, and it will not wait for permission to do so. So yes, today was a mixture of blessings and holiness, but also deep sadness and a renowned awareness of the sheer brutality of Hamas's murders. Yet through it all, there was something constant, something that ran through every conversation, every handshake, every story we heard, and that was pride. Israelis are fiercely proud of their country, their heritage, and their traditions. They carry the scars of history, but they also carry an unshakable resolve that never again is not just a slogan, it's a mission. Never again will the Jewish people be defenseless. Never again will they stand by while their children are slaughtered. And as I stood in these places, both sacred and scarred, I couldn't help but think that maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Whether it's defending your faith, your family, your community, or your nation, there comes a time when you must draw the line and say never again. And from Jerusalem, This is Chris's Corner.
Wow, that was a really powerful testimony to what he's seeing there, and kind of the current events, what Israel is facing. It really is existential. This is not just about October 7. This is not just about modern Israel. The people of Israel have been facing this since before they were founded. And not to make this about me, but I'm going to talk about my experience a little bit for the next few minutes. Chris's report reminds me of my own past in Israel. As I mentioned to Senator Talent a few minutes ago, my dad was a foreign service officer. My brothers and I grew up all over the world, although I am the youngest and I caught the tail end of the travel career. My family lived in Frankfurt, in Bombay, in Moscow, in West Berlin, and in Tel Aviv. I just caught the last 2 assignments. And one of my earliest memories is coming down the stairs in our house in West Berlin and seeing my dad reading maybe 3 or 4 German language newspapers every morning at the breakfast table. He was the spokesman for the American ambassador, the press attaché. He dealt with the foreign press. My parents would throw cocktail parties for the foreign press. Again, I was anywhere from 2 to 7 years old during our time overseas, so I remember very little of it. But the memories I do have, I hold on to. And I think maybe because my father was the press attaché and spent so much time dealing with the media, I maybe absorbed some of that. It was great to have Tony Messenger on the first segment today. I have great respect for journalists of all stripes, broadcast, print. I just feel it's so important what they do for our country. Again, even if you don't care for their own personal views, you really need to look at them by the product that they turn out. And again, seeing my dad read the paper is a memory I hold on to. But in 1978, we were stationed in Israel. My family lived in a town north of Tel Aviv called Herzliya Patuach. And there was one evening I was home with my brothers. My parents were out maybe at a work event or a cocktail party or something like that. I don't remember. But U.S. security guards, embassy security guards who would have been, U.S. Marines, probably not much older than my older brothers, came to the house and took us, escorted my brothers and I to the ambassador's residence. It was a house on the cliff. Ambassador Lewis was the ambassador at the time. He had a house on the cliff overlooking the Mediterranean. There were high fences all around the property. And his house, I remember as a child, was always guarded by soldiers with machine guns slung over their shoulders. And today was no different. My parents, again, were not home. They came and got us. And I was vaguely aware at the time that there had been some attack in Israel and that we were being evacuated to the ambassador's house for our own safety. For years after that, I had nightmares about soldiers. And again, this was a 6-year-old's understanding of the world. They were, tin soldiers marching to come and get me. As an adult, I looked back and it was the Coastal Road Massacre that happened in March of 1978. Palestinian terrorists came up onto the beach about 4 miles from our house and seized a tourist bus and killed about 38 people, including the niece of a United States senator. So I think of that. I think of my own experience in Israel, and I understand that that country, God love them, faces an existential threat. There are people around them, governments who want desperately to destroy them, who aren't concerned about the well-being of their own citizens. And it doesn't make the situation any easier. It doesn't make the solution any more palatable. But I think we have to remember that these are people who, their neighbors want to wipe them out. And we've got to understand that the choices that face Israel are lots of degrees of bad decisions. There's no good choice. They have to protect themselves and choose the best of bad decisions. This is Patrick Tuohey. You're listening to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show, and we'll be right back.
Hey, folks, the Clayton Sleep Institute and my friend Dr. Ojal back supporting free common sense conservative radio. ClaytonSleep.com. treating the full range of adult and pediatric sleep disorders from sleep apnea to insomnia, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movement, and narcolepsy. What an awesome place. New comfy setting for the sleep lab. ClaytonSleep.com, 314-645-5855. Better sleep, better life.
Escape to Stone Ledge Distillery in historic Defiance, Missouri, where Missouri-made spirits meet unforgettable experiences. Sip handcrafted cocktails and martinis in our lounge, unwind in the private cigar room, or soak up the outdoors on our outdoor patio and live music stage. Celebrate Stolock Ozark Highlands whiskey, Inversion vodka, and the best of Missouri spirits. One drink at a time. Mention News Talk STL and get 10% off your tab. Visit stoneledgedistillery.com. Your getaway starts here.
Columbo here for my friends at Bluff City Outdoors in Alton. The knowledgeable staff at Bluff City has served the St. Louis outdoor community for decades, and they can take care of all your bow hunting needs, all your trapping needs, all your fishing needs, and more. Plus, while you're there, you can schedule a trip with a local fishing guide and shoot in their archery range. Bluff City Outdoors is open 7 days a week, 1 mile east of Fast Eddie's at 2813 East Broadway in Alton. Follow them on Facebook and at bluffcityoutdoors.com.
Why leave your company's story to chance? In today's digital world, video content isn't just an option. It's essential for your success. At Blue Ocean Media Group, we've spent decades crafting compelling visual stories for businesses just like yours. From concept to completion, our award-winning team transforms your vision into powerful video content that connects with your audience and drives results. Don't trust your brand to amateurs. Partner with Blue Ocean Media Group. Visit blueoceanmediagroup.com today, and let's bring your story to life.
KLGY HD3 Clayton, K270BW Bellefontaine, KNBS Bowling Green.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Trump is placing the Washington, D.C. Police Department under federal control. White House correspondent Greg Clugston reports.
Concerned about crime and homelessness in the nation's capital, the president signed executive orders giving himself authority to crack down on crime in D.C.
This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back.
He announced that his administration is taking over the Washington, D.C. Police Department and deploying hundreds of National Guard troops. While crime is a problem in the district, like in many U.S. cities, homicide rates here have been falling since 2023. Greg Clugston, the White House.
President Trump says he wants to hear Vladimir Putin's ideas for ending the war in Ukraine when they meet this week.
I'm going to meet with President Putin, and we're going to see what he has in mind. And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders, and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first. And then I'll call them after. And I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting. Or I may say we can make a deal.
Europe and Kyiv worry a deal could be made without them. Neither Zelensky nor European leaders have so far been invited to Friday's summit. Police say 3 people have been killed in a shooting at a Target store in Austin, Texas, and a suspect has been detained. Austin Police Chief Lisa Davis said during a news conference that the suspect fled the scene after the shooting, stole, then wrecked a car and hijacked another. The shooting came amid back-to-school shopping ahead of the upcoming school year. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 200 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
If you're living with pain, see how Relief Factor can help.
My back got injured very bad. I was off work for about a year. I heard about Relief Factor from my wife. I took it every day, 3 times a day for 3 weeks. Look at her and I said, the pain is gone. And she said, I'm glad it helped. I said, no, you don't understand. It's gone.
Fight pain naturally with Relief Factor. Go to relieffactor.com and get your 3-week quick start today. Only $19.95.
At Progressive, we understand the bond you have with your boat. It's why people name theirs.
I named my boat Sure Don't. Get it? The other day when my friend said, hey, Larry, you want to head back in? It looks like it might rain. I said, sure don't. I guess they didn't get it because they didn't laugh.
Whatever you call your boat, protected by insuring it with Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. #1 rating based on boat market share data from ratefilings.com.
From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty, so most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees, and then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two, not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest on the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
This hour of News Talk STL is brought to you by Rodney and Jen Wallner and the entire Wallner home selling team at Berkshire Hathaway. Call them today at 314-810-SOLD. 314-810-SOLD.
Tony Colombo here for Gutter Pros, your all-in-one gutter service team that brings years of experience and quality that's affordable right to your doorstep. We discovered Gutter Pros a few years ago when we bought our home and inherited a gutter issue that was on the road to becoming a potentially big problem, but thanks to Gutter Pros was stopped before causing any major damage. They've also repaired the siding on our home because along with gutter repair, gutter installation, and leaf protection, the Gutter Pros are also the best for siding repair and installation. Learn about all the ways Gutter Pros can help your home at gutterpros.com.
Hungry for the best steak you'll ever have? Head to the heart of Moscow Mills and discover Harry J's, a local landmark and family-owned steakhouse, serving up excellence since '98. From mouth-watering appetizers to decadent desserts, Harry J's has something for everyone. Enjoy our extensive bar selection while soaking in our friendly family atmosphere. Whether dine-in or carry-out, your meal is prepared to perfection. Make the drive to 300 Main Street and treat yourself to a taste of Moscow Mills' finest. Harry J's, more than a steakhouse. We're a tradition.
If you have a phone, you have a radio.
Wherever I'm at, home, car, wherever.
Download the all-new News Talk STL app.
If you have a phone, you have a radio.
Just the convenience on the phone. Streaming live on the mobile app.
Love the new app.
And listen anytime.
Everywhere.
Anywhere. Tim Jones and Chris Arps in the afternoon.
The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
The more you remove voting from Election Day, the more opportunity you're offering for people to commit fraud.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
I think the Democrats are so short-sighted in this tactic they have now to just cheat at any cost to win elections.
You're a lying dog-faced Tony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you.
What are we doing wrong here?
As a former leader in the House, I think you can put your finger on it. It's called leadership. We don't have it.
Tim Jones and Chris Arps.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Tim Jones and Chris Arp Show on 1019 94.1 News Talk STL. This is Patrick Tuohey, Senior Fellow at the Show Me Institute, and Kansas City's second favorite Patrick, guest hosting as Chris and Tim are in Israel. The show will be broadcast tomorrow from Israel, tomorrow and Wednesday, so I recommend you tune in there as well. But for right now, Tim has filed his Speaker Stump speech.
Listen to me, listen to me.
I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius.
It's time for the Speaker's Stump Speech, sponsored by Hanson's Tree Service at hansonstree.com.
This is Tim Jones, former Speaker of your Missouri House, live from the nation state of Israel. All right, immersion in emotion, immersion in emotion. I think that's pretty much what everyone experiences. No matter where you're from, no matter what walk of life, what religion, if you do believe in a greater being, whatever you may call that being, sorry, I'm a little running a little low on sleep here. But whatever you may call that being, whether it may be God, whether it may be Jesus Christ, whether it may be Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, whatever it might be, all of that collides here in what, many often call the cradle of civilization. We're not far from that, right? We're not far from where all human life, if you believe the experts, emanated from. And in an area which has seen peace and war, probably the emphasis on the war part, for not just years, not just tens of years, not just hundreds of years, thousands of years, millennium of years, a conflicted area that many people love. And many people love so much that they want to fight over it tooth and nail. We learned some of that over the last several hours. Again, thank you so much to Newsmax. We are here, folks, on the Newsmax mission to Israel. News Talk STL was invited on this senior media and influencers tour. That's what it's called, from the United States of America. We have contributors here from Newsmax, like our good friend John Gizzi, the White House correspondent for Newsmax, who you have heard several times, many times on this station, specifically on our show. Other great contributors, folks from the Daily Signal, of course, which is a subsidiary of the Heritage Foundation. Again, many friends of the show. I could go on and on and on. So many folks here that we either knew or know of, and it's so great to meet some of them in person for the first time, like Chris Ruddy, the CEO of Newsmax, who's literally leading this delegation. And boy, have we been able to be treated to not only Chris Ruddy, the CEO of Newsmax, but so many other VIPs as well. Left St. Louis on Saturday afternoon. Delayed flight heading to good old Newark, New Jersey. Thanks, Vic Porcelli. I'm just going to blame it on Vic, even though there's no reason to. I think that's where he's from. And it was because of congestion. Hour and a half flight delay. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I won't be going to Israel after all this summer, and we may have to schedule a trip some other time. But nope, the good pilots and the good Lord indeed got us there very swiftly. And I actually ended up, even though I ran from about 75 gates, Newark is a huge airport. Haven't been there in many years. As you all know, I spent a lot of time up on the East Coast. Fordham University, St. John's for law, practice as a prosecuting attorney in Nassau County on the island, but haven't been back to Newark, as Vic says I'm supposed to pronounce it, in a long time. Massive, huge airport. Made it to the plane. The luggage made it. Everything made it. And then a 10-hour hop across the pond, up and over and down into Tel Aviv, landing at approximately 4:30 p.m. Local time. I think it's Israel Daylight Time. I think it's IDT that we're on right now. 8 hours ahead of St. Louis. So you do the math. Yeah, jet lag is a real thing, let me tell you. As soon as we hit the ground, we headed to a place that we've all heard of, that we've seen a bazillion times in movies, on documentaries, on just the news in general, a place that we've talked about, a place, though, that many of us, myself included, my first trip to Israel, my first trip really to the Middle East. I've been blessed to travel internationally many different times, but never to this specific region of the world. But we checked in, and then we immediately headed out for the opening reception because, of course, as it always is on these big, giant tour operations, you're always running 5 to 50 minutes behind. So we immediately had to go over to the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, the edge of the old city of Jerusalem. That's where we headed out first to the, I'm learning a little bit of, it's probably horribly pronounced on my part, but basically, they speak English here. They speak really good English, but they also speak Hebrew. There's also a lot of different dialects and sects. You have the Yiddish, and then of course you have the other different religions and faiths and ethnicities that are here as well. And so you get a lot of different, this is a true diverse melting pot. We headed to the Aish HaTorah World Center, kind of a cultural center. We had a reception and a dinner, and we were spoken to by a member of the Knesset, that's their parliament, Boaz Bismuth, chairman of the Committee for Foreign and Defense Policy of the Knesset and the Israeli parliament. So a wonderful briefing. That was followed by, and this was very entertaining. This guy was just fantastic. National rap star. His rap name is Jimbo J, and he is an Israeli. And he said, he was so funny. He was like, think of me as more of a Vanilla Ice or an Eminem or a combination of the two. His real name, Omar Hebron. And he sang a couple of his songs, and they were rap songs, but they were steeped in culture and history and experiences. Jimbo was evacuated on October 7th, and he has since returned to southern Israel. He's back to performing. He's back to playing. He toured the United States of America last year, and we told him to come back and visit us here in the heartland. He told everybody, it seems like everybody you run into here has an October 7th story, like so many Americans had following 9/11. This was their 9/11. And the Jewish people, and even the guides kind of joke about this, we've had a mixture of happy and sad, joy and depression. And the guides say, that's just very Jewish. That's just what we do. And last night and today was an example of that. Jimbo J, he first sang a very upbeat song that he had performed, that he had written many years ago. And then he sang a song that was a little more poignant, had a little more of of a tinge of sadness to it regarding his experience of October 7th, where he had some of his very closest friends killed on that horrible day. He has now returned to the kibbutz down south, which we're going to visit tomorrow, and that's going to be amazing indeed. So boy, will we have some stories to tell you tomorrow evening. Chris and I will. Today was jam-packed. And I'll tell you, what we did today, I think many people may take days or a week or more to do. But this tour is kind of a sprint. It's a 4-day sprint, Monday through Thursday. And then we have kind of a half day of rest on Friday before we head home. So it's 4 days of everything that they possibly could want to tell us about not only Israel, but of course, the deep history of the city of David, the ancient city of David, and of course, the newer, by their standards, 2,000 years old, of Jerusalem, right? So we started off the morning. The day was broken into 2 pieces. And that's where I say the immersion in emotion comes in, definitely in full force and effect. The morning was spent very historical, very cultural, with a lot of theological themes. We visited the ancient city of David, which until today, I didn't realize is outside of the current old city of Jerusalem's walls. They unearthed some things that were further down the hill, so to speak. If you ever visit here, you'll know what I'm talking about. We went underground and we literally walked on the avenue, the boulevard of stone that went from the low country up to the city walls of the ancient city of David. And then thereafter up to Jerusalem. So this was a road that we can definitely say with certainty at some point, all of it in some fashion was traveled by Jesus the Christ himself and all his disciples. That was the road into Jerusalem. And we walked it today. We went to so many famous sites, the Silliman Pool, the Davidson Center. And then we went back up into the current old city of Jerusalem, and we walked through 2 of the main quarters. The Jewish quarter, which had been rebuilt after the war and all of the conflict and chaos that they had previously experienced between 1948 and the mid-60s, when the Jordanians attacked Jerusalem and basically destroyed everything that the Jews had built. And so it's still in the same theme and the same style, and it still looks old, but the stone, you can tell, is definitely newer. You walk through the Jewish quarter and then into things that I have been learning about since a young kid. Little Timmy going to Sacred Heart Catholic Church and Catholic School in Eureka, Missouri, reading, learning about all these things through my high school years at St. Louis University High, Fordham University, St. John's for Law School. I had an extensive Catholic upbringing. I thank my lifelong Italian, German, Roman Catholic mother for that. And just so I knew of these things, I didn't know how they all fit together and in what way and in what style and in what fashion. So we walked into the Christian Quarter, and then we went to the place that is the definition of the Christian faith. This is the Church of the Resurrection, also known as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And our guide said, well, depends on how you view the world. We call it the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That means death. That means entombment. But if you refer to it as the Church of the Resurrection, that is more of the believer. That is more of the believer in you. That's how you would describe that, because you believe that the sepulcher aspect was not the end. We went to, there's 3 major things. And so all these holy places, Calvary, Golgotha, right? Where the crucifixion occurred, where Jesus's body was laid and prepared for the entombment, the second site. And then the third site, the tomb itself. Maybe in your mind's eye, you view them as very far apart from each other. But remember, back in the day, we didn't have ambulances. We didn't have hearses. We didn't have funeral processions like that. Everybody had a donkey if they were lucky, and you basically did every single thing on foot. So the distances were much more compact than I thought. They're all underneath this massive maze of a church. It was almost churches within churches. And walking up this incredibly steep stone stairway and then into this huge altar area with multiple altars, they said, this is the place where the Christ was crucified. And I feel the emotion again. It was overwhelming. And you could get down underneath the altar, and there's a hole carved out of the stone on purpose, and you could reach down in there and touch the stone. That is where they believe the cross of Christ itself rested, and you could touch that stone, and you could take a moment in prayer, which I did, and everyone, pretty much everyone, all the Christians with us did as well. Back down the stairs, and there is the massive stone slab. and people were genuflecting and prostrating themselves and bringing things to place on the slab in the hopes that some of its power, some of its aura would rub off on it. And then around the corner, there's another chapel. There's chapels within this church. And that was the tomb. And you were able to go into the tomb where Christ was laid and where he was resurrected. And I went in there with one of the other ladies, and we both knelt down in prayer, and we stood up, and we both could see that we were extremely emotional. And it was, if you have the chance, if you ever have the chance to visit this holy land, the Holy Land, as you can tell, I would highly recommend it. The rest of the day, the second half of the day, we returned to the Jewish aspect, the Israeli aspect. We went to the Holocaust Museum. And if I begin giving you more detail, because I'm going a little long here, I'll start getting emotional again because, oh my goodness, if you visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., this is the Holocaust Museum times 10. This is the one built here in Israel by the Jewish people. And it is extensive, and it is amazing, and it is sad. And then after that, we went to a place called the Museum of Tolerance, and there's a huge exhibit there because of October 7th. And they have these live recorded testimonials, and you stand in front of them, and it's a full-size person who survived, their survivor. And then we heard a story from a mom of 2 daughters, and both of her young daughters in their 20s lost their lives on October 7th. Many of you have children. As you know, I'm the father of 2 daughters. Again, extremely emotional. And then in a very Jewish custom, because this is what they do here, right? This is a group of people, an ethnicity, a religion that has lived for thousands of years, as I said in the beginning, with triumphs and defeats, with victory and oppression. And so after that, what did we do? We all went to a restaurant and we all sat down, all 40, 50 of us, and a bunch of our guides and people from the IDF and the police forces. And we had military escorts, and we heard some very interesting stories that I can't go into detail about. And we broke bread together, and we had a wonderful meal at 10 o'clock at night. So made it back to the hotel. And that, my friends, is the speaker's stump speech for today. A complete immersion in emotion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was amazing. I look forward to listening tomorrow when Tim and Chris will be broadcasting from Israel directly. We'll be right back to discuss housing reform in St. Louis. There's some good news with Eli Kahn of the Mercatus Center of Virginia. Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show, 1019 94.1 News Talk STL. We will be right back.
Thinks it goes.
It's the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show.
She make you toast, but she don't use butter. She don't use cheese. She don't use jelly or any of these. She uses Vaseline.
From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty, so most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees, and then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two, not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest on the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
News, analysis, opinion.
Part of this was a Hillary Clinton plan, but part of it was an FBI plan to be an accelerant.
Essentially, a years-long coup that was launched against President Trump.
1019 and 94.1 News Talk STL.
Royal Banks of Missouri is celebrating 60 years of serving the St. Louis community with 15 convenient locations across St. Louis, St. Charles, Hannibal, Rawls County, Jerseyville, and Granite City, Illinois, to serve you with personalized products and services to meet your needs. I'm really excited about this because, as you know, I live in University City, and Royal Banks of Missouri is renewing its commitment to U-City and moving to a new branch at 8550 Olive Boulevard. You can discover how we can help you refresh your finances with convenient, customized banking solutions and invest in your future today. Stop by to experience our brand new branch with the same outstanding client client service. You can also discover how Royal Banks of Missouri can help you set your business up for success. Their treasury management experts offer a suite of customized banking services featuring efficient payment solutions, fraud protection, digital banking, and much more. Access your accounts anytime, anywhere with digital banking from Royal Banks of Missouri. Manage your debit cards, deposit checks, utilize bill pay, and more through Royal Banks of Missouri's mobile apps. As you can see, Royal Banks is the bank for you. Check them out. Royal Banks of Missouri, investing in our communities one client at a time. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Hi, Sean Long from STL Fenceworks. A new fence or deck is an investment in your home and your lifestyle. But how do you ensure that you're getting the most out of that investment? At STL Fenceworks, we know the key is satisfaction. Satisfaction means getting a fence or deck that not only meets your needs, but exceeds your expectations. Satisfaction means working with a team that cares about your project as much as you do. Satisfaction means having confidence in the quality of your new fence or deck, knowing that it was built with the best of materials and workmanship. STL Fenceworks, your satisfaction is our passion. And for me, satisfaction is knowing that providing for your family is how I provide for mine. Visit stlfenceworks.com and experience the satisfaction in making your backyard dreams into a reality.
You're listening to Tim Jones and Chris Arps.
Good afternoon, St. Louis. Welcome to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show on 1019 941 News Talk STL. This is Patrick Tuohey, Senior Fellow with the Show Me Institute, sitting in. I am Kansas City's second favorite Patrick. Tim and Chris, as you know, are in Israel this week, in addition to do a number of segments on other News Talk STL shows this week. They'll be doing their entire show tomorrow and Wednesday from Israel. If you've heard me speak to Chris and Tim as a guest in the past, there's a good chance I've either been talking about housing or crime. And oftentimes, I'm sorry to say, I am delivering bad news. And the next two segments will be talking about housing and crime. But the good news is there's been some good news out of St. Louis. My first guest is Eli Kahn of the Mercatus Center at George Mason University in Virginia. Eli and his colleagues at the Urbanity Project have done a lot of work outlining possible housing reforms and working with municipalities to adopt them. And like I said, there is good news on this topic out of St. Louis. 2 weeks ago, the Board of Aldermen approved without opposition legislation reducing the lot size needed to build single and two-family homes. Before, a single-family home required a lot of at least 4,000 square feet, while a two-family home must have been built on lots that were at least 5,000 square feet. The effort to change them, reduces the requirements to 2,000 square feet for single family and 2,500 for some two-family units. And again, it is still St. Louis. Not all of the moves they have made are good, and not all of them will bring down the cost of housing, but this is something positive I wanted to highlight. Eli, welcome to the Jones and Arp Show, and tell us about what lot size reform can mean for St. Louis or any city around the country.
Thanks, Patrick. Great to be here. Well, the main thing to know about minimum lot size reform is that over the course of the 20th century, basically, cities have really been requiring sort of larger and larger lot sizes, and this drives up the cost of housing because you're essentially requiring the developer to create a parcel of land where very little of it is going to make them money. It's, they're
Sure.
only able to sell the building along with the land, so there's less opportunity to devote that land to its highest and best use. And people might lots of people do like living on large lots, but when you when you kind of deny people the ability to choose and don't let the market operate and let people make the trade-offs they want to, that's when you start, kicking out the bottom rungs of that housing ladder.
Eli, tell me, and maybe in the best, let's assume the best possible motivation on the part of regulators who are demanding larger and larger lot sizes, why are they doing it?
Well, I think the best possible motivation is they think, they have an idea of a kind of housing that they think is someone's dream home. And they think, well, if we just mandate that all of the homes that get built are that, then everyone will have their dream home. But it ends up not working that way because the builders can't meet those mandates, and there just ends up being less housing built.
No, it is one of those things. And again, consider your source. And of course, we're on a conservative talk radio station. It's one of those things where legislators or policymakers want to be judged by their intention, yet the outcome is just horrible. I think immediately of kind of minimum wage laws. Well, how about we just mandate that everybody make $1 million an hour and we can all be billionaires together and laughing? Well, of course, it's ridiculous because it just drives up the cost of everything else. And relatively, you're not making people better. What frustrates me about lot size and again, so many housing regulations is the people who adopt them or enforce them or call for them mean well. And I think you're exactly right. We have this idea of what proper housing should be. And it's not just lot size, it's minimum square footage. Maybe it's energy codes so that the house can be greener and better to the environment. But each one of those things we do, each level of complexity, each level of cost drives up the cost. So we end up, and you put it exactly right, kicking out the bottom rungs of the ladder. What we're doing is we're trapping the poor in older homes that are maybe grandfathered from some of these regulations. And it's so frustrating because when I talk to my friends on the left, I say, look, I understand you mean well, but the impact of all this stuff is well, what we've seen in this country for 40 years now, housing prices just going up, up, up. I was pleasantly surprised that St. Louis has at least changed this one policy. I know you may not be familiar with St. Louis particularly, but what is driving cities to maybe rethink some of these regulations? Are they seeing the light? Is it kind of the YIMBY movement? Is it a revenue, or are they just staring at an urban core that's hollowing out and they want to do something?
I think it depends on the city. I think there's certainly some impact from the YIMBY movement. People are increasingly, there's increasingly people in their 20s, 30s, 40s not able to afford to buy a home to begin with, and people are getting very, very frustrated. So there's a lot more activism around that. But also, I think some cities are really seeing the positive example of other cities like Houston that have led the way on this kind of reform, and seeing that it doesn't make the sky fall down. Really, you can allow more housing to get built, and the whole world doesn't collapse. So I think more cities are taking action since they see there have been successes.
I'm glad you mentioned Houston because, listeners, hold on to your hats. Houston does not have zoning. It never adopted zoning. And so this kind of policy that people think of as being absolutely necessary, and without it, the sky would fall. We have a large metropolitan city like Houston, never adopted zoning. They've seen a great amount of growth population-wise, but their housing costs haven't skyrocketed like other cities have because property owners are free to develop largely as they want to. And one of my biggest frustrations, and Eli, you may run into this too, is among self-described conservatives who will tell you on 9 issues out of 10 that they love the free market. But when it comes to housing, in effect, they advocate for government policy restricting people's property rights. Again, you're probably not seeing that in St. Louis because I think the last conservative in St. Louis probably moved out a decade ago. But it's welcome news. You're seeing this elsewhere, like you said, and maybe it's because of Houston. Are there other things that Mercatus recommends that cities do? And then in a moment, I want to talk about what your colleagues wrote about New Rochelle, New York. But what are some other things that St. Louis or other cities could do to kind of keep the momentum going of good policy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are a number of things, a number of policies we recommend. There's allowing more construction of accessory dwelling units or ADUs. People might have, some listeners might have heard of these. You know, it's someone who owns a home might want to build an accessory unit, maybe for a parent who's looking to downsize and move close to their grandkids, or an adult child who might be moving back home. And those often are sometimes in kind of a legal gray area. So it helps to have clear laws that let people develop those if that's what they want to do. That's one option. There's also a lot of different questions around the process of getting housing permitted. And this is, you know, as complicated as the systems of government all across the country. You know, every place is its own unique animal in terms of what the permitting process looks like. But you know, you have some local governments that want to come back for more and more hearings, and they want to, you know, revisit plans again and again. And then sometimes there's, on the other end, you have the question of who has standing to sue if a permit is granted. You know, if someone gets a development permit, but then some neighbors sue because they don't like that permit was issued, then, you know, the developer can get tied up in lawsuits for years, and that lack of clarity can really put a damper on development. So that's
one of the first things I learned when I was writing about housing was a developer they want to hear yes, but they're okay with hearing no. What they don't want to hear is maybe, because that extends their costs as far as the sunset, and yet they never have the satisfaction of yes, so they can build something and start generating a revenue. And then your colleague Emily Hamilton coined the term, as far as I know, when it comes to housing, of the vetocracy, which is you allow these community groups, if something's being built near them, to in effect block it. And of course, they have every incentive to block it, but you're not allowing the would-be potential people who would move in to to have a say. And so what we're doing slowly over time is making it so expensive to build that we're in the situation we have now, which you discussed. You know, my oldest daughter is in her 20s. She's looked around at buying a house. I don't envy her. Not only are interest rates horrible, but just housing prices, because there aren't enough to go around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I wonder, are there, people always ask me this, and I often will talk about Houston. Are there cities that are examples of good reform, or at least cities that are kind of opening up to adopting new reforms? You know, I think of Seattle or Minneapolis, but are there places that are kind of are models of what cities should be doing?
Yeah, well, this is perfect excuse to talk about New Rochelle, which is one of the few cities in that part of the Northeast that's really seen some growth recently. And that was because of reforms they did in recent years, where one of the things they did that I think was really helpful was they created a sort of general environmental impact report. This is one of the permitting process elements that really slows down a lot of developments, where the developer has to, you know, research any possible impact to the environment that could possibly occur from the development, and come up with anything they could anticipate. And so for the city to take on the burden of saying, well, we actually are going to create a general document that developers can refer to, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, that really helped.
No, what New Rochelle and one of your colleagues, Salim Firth, wrote kind of a book about what New Rochelle did. And again, it's about half an hour outside of New York City. They had been facing maybe 16 years of just no new construction because their permitting system, their process, their approval system was so burdensome that developers had just given up. And so they realized what their problem was. And exactly to your point, they kind of said, we're going to grab this whole area of downtown. We're going to do one environmental impact study of the whole area rather than parcel by parcel. And if I remember correctly, it was one developer who agreed to pay for it. And then once that was done, the developer sat down with the community and said, what are the kind of amenities you want? And maybe they wanted, a theater for children, or they wanted, retail, or what type of retail. And then kind of allowed the developer, kind of gave them permission to build, and said, oh, and if you add this thing that the community wants, like a black box theater, for example, we will allow you to add another story to your construction. And I talked to one of the developers, and one of the fascinating things he told me, which he didn't realize at the time, was what that whole process did is it removed the ability of the community to come back at the end of the process and say no, because he got buy-in with them early on. And again, everybody says that's the thing about NIMBYs. Everybody says they want housing. They just say not here. And it's tragic that in St. Louis and elsewhere, we've allowed those people to kind of capture the stage. Sorry, Eli, I'm having you on as a guest and now I'm monologuing, but it's such an important issue. And I'm so frustrated that people who, either just want to express their own political preference or just complain about this little thing, the effect of it is that we are millions of units behind what we need in this country. And we are seeing a homelessness crisis that is not entirely unrelated.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things, one of the ways I would put it for people who are more conservative, more right-leaning is, look, the demand for some of these more, rural, large lot houses, that's not going away. There are still many people who are really dreaming of living, on a big lot in the country. And nothing about these reforms makes any of that illegal. Nothing about these reforms is going to harm that. It's just, let's let the market decide what type of housing exists instead of trying to mandate every little thing.
Yes, you're exactly right. And it really is amazing how sometimes when it comes to housing, we have to remind conservatives of their own principles, that, allow your neighbors to do with their property what they want. They will allow you to do with your property what you want. And the collective benefit over time everybody will be wealthier. And if you don't like how your neighborhood is changing over time, you are perfectly able to sell and move away. But what you don't get to do is use your preference to stop everybody else around you from doing what they want with their property. Yet, crazily, that's the system we've built right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eli, I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for coming on. That's Eli Kahn of the Mercatus Center at George Mason University in Virginia. You're listening to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps show on 101.9 and 94.1 News Talk STL. We will be right back to talk crime.
It's the Tim Jones and Chris Arps show. This hour of Jones and Arps is brought to you by Stifel. Contact your Stifel financial advisor at stifel.com. That's STIFEL.com. From the Michaels Flooring Outlet Weather Center.
I'm First Alert 4 Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton. Slight chance for an isolated shower this evening. Most of those fade by sunset, and they'll be pretty spotty, so most of us just drive warm and muggy tonight, low down to 75 degrees. And then a high of 92 Tuesday. Better chance for a few scattered showers and thunder showers, an isolated downpour or two, not out of the question Tuesday, mainly in the afternoon to early evening hours. And then Wednesday, a high of 89, slight chance for an isolated thunder shower in the afternoon. That's the latest on the First Alert 4 Weather Center. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Templeton.
The Vic Porcelli Show.
Should junk food be allowed to be purchased with a SNAP card? We used to call those food stamps. We'll ask Dr. Randy Tobler about that Tuesday at 11:05.
Weekday mornings at 9 on News Talk STL.
Concerned about the condition of your windows driving up your energy bills? I was too. It's only called STL Windows and Doors. Their Provia windows combine old world craftsmanship the professional way, the Provia way, with over 65 years of combined experience, locally owned, offering competitive pricing and personalized service that the big box companies can't match. Call today for your free in-home estimate and start saving tomorrow. 314-277-5952 or stlwindowsanddoors.com.
Hey, it's Vic Porcelli here with our great friend Chris Cooper from Serenity Wealth Management. Hi, Chris.
How are you, Vic?
I don't want to put anybody else down, but when you go up and visit you at Serenity Wealth, your place looks like home.
So a lot of financial advisory offices, they have, the big mahogany desk or the big marble entryways and things like that, the stock market channel on the TV when you walk in the door, right? That doesn't really drive a good conversation. Good financial guidance and advice starts with a good conversation. People are nervous. People are afraid to talk about finances, right? And so you can see a little standoffish. Well, my objective is to try to have a good casual conversation. By having those conversations about life, goals, objectives, it's what makes me understand what our financials are supposed to fund.
So if somebody does want to have a good conversation, how do they do that? How do they find you?
Our website is the best way to do that because you can get all the information you need, understand where we are, get a little bit more information, all that. SerenityWealthNow.com.
Reach out to Chris and Stacy today at SerenityWealthNow.com.
Investment advice offered through Fortis Capital Advisors, LLC.
Hi, Kirk Hilsinger here, and I'm the new chairman of the St. Louis Republican Central Committee. I invite you to our meetings that take place the first Thursday of every month at 3710 Hampton Avenue. You can stay connected with us to learn more about how you can get involved, make your voice heard, and contribute to our shared goals. Together, we can make a difference in the city of St. Louis and the state of Missouri. For more info, visit our new website at stl-gop.com. That's stl-gop.com.
Paid for by St. Louis City Republican PAC. Curtis Farber, Treasurer.
Summer is here, and that means it's time to gear up at Whistle Pig Outdoors on Main in Troy. Mike Ferguson here for my friends at Whistle Pig Outdoors, family owned and operated by hunters who know their stuff. Beat the heat with premium Costa sunglasses and American-made Grizzly coolers that keep everything ice cold. Upgrade your bow at their full-service archery shop. Expert technician on staff for Hoyt and Bear bows. Call 636-775-1110 or visit Main Street in Troy. Whistle Pig Outdoors, your year-round outdoor headquarters.
You're listening to Tim Jones and Chris Arps.
Hey, see that, kids? That's the St. Louis Arch, the gateway to the west.
Clark, I think this is the wrong exit.
What's the difference, as long as we get across the river?
Clark, what are you doing?
Just relax, Ellen.
This is so dangerous. We have no business being in an area like this.
Well, look at it this way, honey. This is a part of America we never get to see.
That's good.
No, that's bad. I mean, we can't close our eyes to the plight of the cities. Kids, you noticing all this plight? This will just make us appreciate what we have. Roll them up.
Roll them up indeed. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show. This is Patrick Tuohey of the Show Me Institute, and we're in the final stretch of the show before handing you off to Larry Connors USA at 6 p.m. Tim and Chris will be back tomorrow and Wednesday, where they'll be broadcasting the show from Israel. And of course, the clip we played is from National Lampoon's Vacation, released in 1983. As far back as 1983, St. Louis has known as a rough and tumble city, having a high crime rate. And I like to remind my friends in St. Louis that the Kurt Russell film Escape from New York was filmed in St. Louis. So again, what we're seeing in St. Louis these days is nothing new. But there may be hope that things are looking up. To tell us what she's learned, my colleague from the Show Me Institute, Susan Pendergrass, our director of research, has been looking into the data. Susan, you lived in St. Louis for several years. So let me ask you before we begin, is the image that people from the outside see of St. Louis, is that real? Is that true?
Okay, so that's a complicated question and thanks for having me. Certainly, there's a lot of information out there that in the last few years, things have gotten better. And I did live in the city for about 5 years. And, I find it interesting that there's these occasional surveys that will say, do you feel safe walking to your car at night in the dark? And in St. Louis, I would have to say after living there, the answer was no. And it's hard to put your finger on like exactly why, but I just did not have a feeling of safety there, even though crime is down. And it has been down now for several years, but I just did not have the general feeling of safety. There's still a lot going on in St. Louis in terms of people, just running stop signs and stoplights and passing you on the shoulder. And it doesn't seem like, I had a smash and grab in my car and the police didn't come. So I don't think that St. Louis, even though crime numbers are down, I don't think that they've yet dealt with like the feeling of feeling safe.
All right, that's a really good point. But first, define for me, when you say crime is down, is it all types of crime? Is it particular types of crime? What does that mean?
Yeah, so consistently, I've been looking at St. Louis going back to about 86, and then St. Louis compared to cities in Missouri, Kansas City and Springfield, and St. Louis compared to similar cities in the country. And the thing that still is really problematic in St. Louis is the homicide rate, which is down, but if you fit a trend line to the last 10 or 15 years, it still slopes up. It is still going up on a per capita basis. And the other thing is motor vehicle thefts. Not only did they incredibly spike during COVID when the whole Kia Hyundai TikTok video came out, but 9 out of 10 go unsolved. And when there's a category of crime where almost none of them get cleared or solved, you're just going to get more of that because no one's going to really feel like they're going to get in trouble for doing it. So motor vehicle thefts are out of control and set St. Louis apart from both the Missouri cities and from these other 4 cities we looked at. I should caveat, other than Memphis, which Memphis is getting to be more dangerous than St. Louis. But, for the most part, homicides and motor vehicle thefts are still a problem. Now, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, robbery, those rates on a per capita basis are down substantially. And St. Louis looks pretty similar to Kansas City and Springfield in those categories and compared to the other cities in the country. But the homicides and motor vehicle thefts are still a big problem.
So let me ask you, because I know you've looked into this and you've actually done some interviews on the Show Me podcast about this issue. How do we, I've had a car broken into in my driveway in Kansas City, which I never bothered reporting because I just assumed nothing would happen. So how do we know? Because at what point, I guess when a city has really lost hope, you can say that crime has plateaued or gone down, but really what's happening is people just aren't bothering to report it. Are you able to suss out in St. Louis what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's often called the dark figure, which is unreported crime. And I think you're exactly right. I had a smash and grab and they would not take a report. We had an intern this summer who only was in St. Louis for maybe 6 weeks and had 2 smash and grabs in his car. And that's a good example because the first time he had one, they broke out his window and they broke out the windows of like a whole bunch of cars on the street. So while they got a form to fill out to make a report, he felt like somebody else had reported it. So there was no sense in him reporting it. The second time it happened and they tried to steal his car in addition, he decided he was leaving St. Louis. And so he just got focused on getting his stuff and moving out of there. And he just didn't report it. But I do think that there's something to the idea that if you have no faith that the police are going to take it seriously or show up, then you are likely just not to report it. And a funny story, I was called for jury duty in St. Louis and was actually selected, which blew my mind. But in the questioning of the jury pool to see who was going to be on the jury, they asked the question, have any of you ever had a car broken into? And literally every person in the room raised their hands. So it was like not even a qualifying question, because like just everybody had their car broken into. And when that's the case, no one's going to want to go to a Cardinals game or go downtown to the aquarium if you think your car's, the deal is you just leave your car unlocked and expect people to rifle through it. But that's not the sign of a safe city.
So there are two things I want to pick up on what you've said. So the first is you talked about not feeling safe, which again, as somebody who's looked into the data, I know you appreciate this. That's a really unfair statement because it can't be quantified, and it's really difficult for even the most well-intended police officer or board of aldermen to respond to the feeling of safe. But I'm aware, and I know you're aware of things like lighting the streets and cutting the grass and cleaning up graffiti and just doing kind of the basic stuff. Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about a feeling of safety?
Yeah, so it's often referred to as public disorder. And there was a study done on Chattanooga, Tennessee, which their crime rate also is way down, but the perception of crime is not down. So they had a survey of residents and asked them these kinds of questions. Do you feel safe walking to your car? Do you feel more safe today than you did 5 years ago or less safe? And these kinds of questions, it is a hard thing to conceptualize, but sort of those, it when you feel it. And if you just don't feel safe walking your dog after dark, then that's not a city where families are going to move to or businesses are going to locate or, people are going to want to stay and raise their kids. They're going to move out when they have kids. And, there was a story about a major corporation in St. Louis, and they were recruiting an executive, and he and his wife came to visit, and she rode the public transportation system there and basically said, nope, I'm not going to live here. And that makes that feeling of feeling unsafe, whether you're a victim of crime or not, it can make or break a city. And St. Louis does need to respond to that. So, and then the other part of that, and again, there's great data on crime, but like you're pointing out, a lot of it is just kind of this vague notion. Even if the city were doing well, like you say, on a broad number of crimes, sometimes you need a string of years of success, I imagine, for the public to catch up. And like that scene from National Lampoon's Vacation shows, when you've got 50 years of a bad reputation, even when things get better, it's tough to overcome that public view. I mean, is it just a matter that St. Louis is on the right track? Do they just need to wait for a public perception to come around, maybe in 5 or 7 years? Well, I think that if people saw more of a police presence, and I'm not necessarily personally talking about the National Guard, but if they saw more of a police presence, more of those, boxes that you can call the police, if they felt like when they call the police will come, I think that would shorten that lag between when crime goes down and when people feel safer. But I'm not sure that is happening right now. And I often liken it to the drinking water in Flint. It's just going to take time for people to trust that again. But I do think that there are things St. Louis could be doing, and I don't know, they're gimmicky things. I don't know if they could guarantee people will have a safe vacation, or they could guarantee, I don't know, if there was a thing that they could do to make to make people feel safer and guarantee they will be safer when they go to a Cardinals game or to a Blues game. I think that there are things that the city could prioritize around, again, public disorder and property crimes and this feeling of being safe that they could do.
You've looked at other cities. In the last few seconds we have, are there things that other cities have done along those lines that show promise?
Yeah, Detroit is an outlier. They've been working on a community-based program where they give community groups money, and if within their neighborhood or community their crime rates go down below the citywide average, they get money again. So there are some good ideas, and certainly we have a lot more information on mapping out crime. And we have a lot more cameras and things like that make it better. But yeah, there are definitely things we could be doing.
And just quickly, has that incentive worked? I kind of like that idea. Has it borne fruit as far as we know? That's wonderful.
Detroit
Susan,
is a success story. I mean, it's not it's not completely there, but Detroit's had success with that program.
Susan, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this. Thank you, St. Louis. Thank you to Tim and Chris for the opportunity to sit in. And thank you to Joey V for doing all the hard work. This is Patrick Tuohey sitting in on 1019 941 News Talk STL. Larry Connors USA is next.
Hey, firearms enthusiast. Looking for a family and veteran-owned shop with a wide selection of products and services? Head to DG Firearms, 115 Business Highway 61 North in Bowling Green. DG Firearms has been your one-stop shop for custom ARs, Cerakoting, laser engraving, gunsmithing, suppressors, ammo, and reloading supplies. DG Firearms, 115 Business Highway 61 North in Bowling Green, and online at dgfirearmsllc.com.
Hey, it's Susie Moore. If new flooring makes you think hassle, think again, because Michael's Flooring is changing the game. For over 30 years, Michael's has been locally owned and trusted for quality, variety, and amazing service. Whether it's carpet, hardwood, laminate, luxury vinyl, or ceramic tile, their expert team makes installing new floors exciting, not stressful. That's why customers keep coming back. Visit Michael's Flooring at St. Peter's, Starting Prairie, Creve Coeur, or online at igotfloored.com. That's igotfloored.com.
Kathy Connor from Connor Roofing is here. Kathy, how you doing?
Good. Hi, Vic.
You know, when you need a roof, I don't want to call a stranger. I want to call you.
Yeah, thanks. At Connor Roofing, we're more than just a roofing company.
How long have you been doing it?
Since 1993.
And year after year, storm after storm, you guys are always there.
Because this is our home too, Vic. Our kids go to school with your kids. We cheer for the same teams. Go Blues!
So support your neighbors. Call Connor Roofing at 314-375-7475 or CONNER roofing.com.
Thanks, Vic.
Tim and Chris head to Israel all this week. Keep listening all day, every day for our first-hand reports.
News Talk STL.